I'm really excited about today's lesson. I'm going to teach you how to make a very simple t-shirt quilt. Everybody has drawers full of t-shirts with logos on them that don't fit them or they don't wear them anymore, but they have a memory of something really important to them and they want to make it into a quilt functional item. And it's fun, it's a great idea. If you're interested in making money being a quilt maker, this is what I would call my bread and butter. I've made a couple hundred of these easy, and I know every trick there is, and that's why I'm so excited to share all that with you today. And my granddaughter, I was showing her that I'm making these lessons, and she said, "Oh, I have a pile of t-shirts that I'd like made into quilts." And I said, "Great, that's really great." So she gave me these t-shirts, and what I've done right now is I've divided them into two piles. One pile is t-shirts that just have something on the front, and the other pile is t-shirts that have something on the front and the back. And so I'm going to show you how to handle both of those. It's a different thing. The first one is that everything is cut in a multiple of 5. And what happens is you don't know exactly how these are going to fit together. But if you cut everything in a multiple of 5, it'll be either 5 by 5, 5 by 10, 10 by 10, 15 by 10, 15 by 15. And then what happens is, I will show you this in the next step, we're going to put them all up on a wall, or you'll put them on the floor to make them all work into be a perfect rectangle or square to make your quilt. So that's the first secret, multiples of 5. The second secret is that t-shirts are really stretchy, and that's one of the things we like about them. They're knit, you can stretch them, they just bend a lot. But when you're working in a quilt, you really don't want something that's so bendy, because it will stretch out of shape, it won't hold a seam correctly. So what I always do is use my t-shirts double. A double layer of t-shirt makes all the difference in the world. If you're a sewer, you know about interfacing. Interfacing adds that third layer that gives you the stability, and this is the same idea in this. So what we're doing, that's the reason why I divided up the t-shirts into ones that have front and a front and a back. Here I have a t-shirt that is just on the front, and the first thing I'm going to do is look at the height of it, and I see here I can do a 10-inch. A 5-inch is too short, it won't kind of kit everything, but a 10-inch is great and it will be very nice. And now I'm going to look at it this way, and actually it turns out that I could do a 10-inch this way too. So that's what I'm going to do for this particular t-shirt. I'm going to cut it down to a 10 by 10. And again, we always in quilting, we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to be cutting everything at 10 and a half. So the first thing I do is cut off the bottom, and what I do is save all the bottoms over here. I keep all the bottoms because when I maybe need a double for something else, another extra layer, I might use the extra bottoms. I'm going to show you that later, but I just save everything until I'm sure what I need. Same thing about this. I'm going to look at 10 and a half, and I'm going to first cut off the sleeve. And again, I save the sleeves, but the underarm is really pretty useless. So just going forward, I just cut off the underarm and then put all the sleeves in a pile. Sometimes the sleeves are very useful for binding, just because you need some extra material. Sometimes they are good remnants to make another quilt. And again, the person who you're giving this quilt to or making it for, they don't care about the sleeves, they don't care about the bottom, they care about the logo. So now I've cut this 10 and a half inches this way, and now I'm going to finish it off at 10 and a half inches this way. And this is the block that's 10 by 10. And I'm going to cut all of these t-shirts and just pile all the blocks here, not worrying about how they're going to fit together yet at all, just trying to get them into these 5-inch increments. I have something that I need both sides. Then what I do is, the first thing I do is cut off the sleeves. Nice orange color, then I'm going to add some color to it. I don't have a sample of the quilt, of any of these quilts, because I always do them by commission. I don't own any of them for myself. So what I'm going to do is on the next section, I'll give you a little bit of a portfolio so you can see what all the variations look like. So then what I have to do is separate this out. So I have the front and the back are now separate because I cut off the sleeves and the sides. And I'm going to look at this, and it's going to be 10. It's also going to be 10 by 10. So again, I'm going to cut off the bottom, make sure that the words are kind of even. I'm going to save this. Ten and a half. I'm going to go back and take care of this one in a minute. Now I'm going to have to do this double, so I can either cut it now, so I still don't have a piece that's big enough, so I'm going to wait a little while. I'm just going to cut it now at 10 and a half, and then I'm going to find something to line it with, and it won't matter what it is, but there'll be 2 layers. It doesn't matter what color it is because you don't see it at all at the end. There'll just be these 2 layers. So the first part of the project is to cut all of the logos, make sure there are 2 layers for each piece, and there'll be a multiple of 5, 10, or 15. I'm going to show you this t-shirt because it's a little more complicated, and it'll help you understand more what I'm trying to do. So the first thing is there's this really nice logo up here, which will clearly be a 5-inch square. And then there's also this adorable little, I think it's a porcupine, I'm not sure, but a little animal that is really nice and will be great, look pretty in the quilt. So the first thing I have to do is figure out how to get this 5-inch square out. And it's a funny thing because I don't want to interfere with her at all. So in fact, I think really in this case, I'm going to go straight down the center of the t-shirt. Yeah, I am. I'm going to put this aside for the moment. And then the 5 I need for, this is just a little, it says Dream Design. So I'm just going to figure out what 5.5 looks like on this. And it's nice, this is the ruler that I use. We're going to use this as the double side for the other piece. But in this ruler I use, it's a 6-inch ruler, so it's real easy to mark. Let's do the 5.5 this way first. It's easier just to cut off the sleeve. Again, cut off the underarm. Oh. And then I can just do this. So this is the 5.5-inch square. This is the second part. Remember this animal that's kind of on the side? So the first thing I do is have to cut off the sleeve. And then I'll be able to open it up and look at the measurement. And I have I'll use this as a second layer, but I think in this case it's going to be easier to cut it first. So it's 10 for the width, and it's 10 for the length. So I think I'll cut this down first. it's 10.5 that way. And then sometimes I like to keep the edge on, but it doesn't go quite to 15, so I'm not going to do that on this one. If it was like 15.5, then I would keep the edge, but I'm not going to do that for this one. So we're going to do another 10.5. And this is the 10.5-inch square. Again, now what I'm going to do is lay it on this extra piece, which I know will be big enough. And that's just so I can cut it double and have that double layer of T-shirt. This is my pinup wall. It's really an important part of my quilt making process because everything that I do goes on the wall so I can see how it's coming together, and it's very easy to work with. If you don't have a wall, you can, of course, you can use the floor or a table. And sometimes people will take a big piece of flannel and pin it up on their wall just to use it temporarily. But this is made of homosode and it's just really great to have. So I have taken all the pieces of the T-shirts and I have put them into rows. So it's very important for the next step where we're going to be quilting it is that the rows be in straight lines. So this is 10 inches. These are 15-inch blocks. These are 15-inch and these are 10. So that altogether, that'll be a 50-inch square going this way, and then it happens that the way they piece together, it's a 50-inch square going down also. It could be more. It could be maybe somebody has you need a whole nother row, or maybe they want it to be queen size, or you have to work it out and down till you get it into a rectangle or square shape. And just to see here, like these were 5-inch pieces, so what I have to do is sew them together and then sew them straight down. So this, I did sew these two rows together so you could see how they come together. And remember, they're 2 layers. And I just wanted to also show you this one, just to end it here. This one, I needed a 15-inch piece and it wasn't quite wide enough. So what I did was cut the piece and I cut the backing, and then I sewed on the edges from this T-shirt quilt because it's just, pretty and adds a little color to it. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to sew all of these rows into straight rows, and then we'll go on to the next step. We know that our quilt top is 50 inches square. So now we have to make a backing. We need a backing that's 60 inches square. And 60 inches is a great width because if you prefer, you can just go to the fabric store and buy fleeces 60 inches wide, and knit fabric comes 60 inches wide. Some denims come 60 inches wide, and those are all good choices for the backing of the quilt, of a T-shirt quilt. Maya, my granddaughter, wanted it to be coral colored. That's an unusual color, and also she's worried about maybe someday she might want it to be bigger than it is because 50 inches square is a little small. Maybe she's going to want to add T-shirts someday. That's a whole other story. But at any rate, what I did is I went to the Goodwill and I bought a bunch of large size coral colored T-shirts, and I've cut them and I'm going to piece them to make the backing. So what I did is I determined that I could cut them about 20 inches in width, and then I could take the 20 inches pieces and sew them together. And just to say that I try to keep the edges, the sewn edges of the T-shirt in there because it just gives it a little more stability. And also, it doesn't bother me if there's like a little logo, or maybe this is another piece. Sometimes I have just a little bit of a shirt, which doesn't really mean anything. It just adds some interest. So I don't mind keeping those on there. But that's up to you how much you want to cut out of it. But I just want to show you now how I cut a shirt. So what I'm going to do is I cut off the first end, and then I see what 20 inches is, and then I cut off the second side, and that's waist. And then what I do is cut it here so it's straight across. And this is waist also, but I have these nice big pieces that are 20 inches square, and then I can put together to make a 60-inch square for the backing of the quilt. we're ready to take the rows that we have 4 rows of t-shirts, and we're ready to take those rows and sew them to each other, and at the same time sew them to the backing. And we're using a technique called quilt as you go. And so what I'm going to do is, I just wanted to show you that there are 4 rows. I'm going to take this one off for later, and this one off for later here, and now you can see the backing a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take the middle 2 rows, and I've kind of centered them into the middle of the backing, and the backing is right sides down, so you can see the seams in here, and this is the backing. And the backing is just 1 layer, but the t-shirts are 2 layers, so altogether it'll be 3 layers, so it'll be a pretty substantial quilt when it's done. So you put them right side up, make sure they're the way you want them, make sure they're centered properly, and then you're going to take this and put them right sides together and pin the top. Make sure you're pinning, really it's 5 layers. It's 2 layers for this, 2 layers for this, and 1 layer for the bottom. And then come all the way down here and pin this end. It doesn't really matter how you put the pins in. You should always, when you're sewing in these cases, take out the pins before you get to them anyway. So it's just you're just holding it in place, and try to be generous with the pins on this. A lot of times I don't do any pinning, but in this case, the more you pin, the easier it will be for the sewing, because this is a lot of fabric. It's a little bit bulky to put under the machine, and the more pins you have, the easier it is to just keep control of it. Make sure you don't miss any of the 4 layers of the t-shirts. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew it. And now we're going to sew again 2 layers of 1 t-shirt row, 2 layers of the other t-shirt row to the backing. And you want to make sure that the backing is open flat. You know, and this could be really a wad of fabric depending on what the backing is and how big the quilt is. But we're starting in the middle, and we're going to be sewing down this seam allowance. So what you're going to do is back stitch at the top. And by the way, it's made for 1/4 inch, but just to be safe and make sure I'm catching all the layers, I go a little bit beyond the 1/4 inch here. Every time I get to a needle, I get to a pin, I leave the needle in. Just take the needle out and then keep on going. And just make sure it's flat. Again, making sure I'm catching all 4 layers. Backing is flat. And I'm not pulling or stretching, just feeding it through the machine. Back stitch to the end. Cut the thread, and we're going to go back over to the table to put on the next 2 rows. Back at the table, it's time to add the outside rows. And again, there could be more than just these 4 rows. It could be 6 rows, but if you start in the middle and you do the first center row, and then you can do the next 2 at one time, because they don't connect with each other. So what you're doing is put it right side up, make sure it's right, make sure all the t-shirts are right side up, Sometimes I end up finding one that I put upside down, and that's a drag because you have to take the whole thing out. And then do the same thing that you did before. Pin through all 5 layers at the top, all 5 layers at the bottom. Pin the rows all the way along. Be generous with your pins. Do the same thing on the other side. Take it to the machine and do the sewing down both sides, and then we'll be back here again. All right, so now we have sewn all the rows. Quilt top is finished, and it's attached to the backing in each of those straight lines. And now we're going to make the binding. So what I do is trim off and leave. You can use a hem gauge to measure. You want about an inch and a quarter, just enough so that you'll be able to turn it and so this is waist. You're going to do this around all 4 edges. And then what you do is you take the edge, the raw edge, you turn it into the t-shirt, and then you turn it again and pin it. You're going to do that all the way along, all 4 sides. And then you'll do a row of stitching that goes here, you turn it at the corner. And the stitching will go all the way through all the layers and the fold of the binding, and you will have a really nice t-shirt quilt.